Hey guys, tonight we're standing outside the walls of Carthage in the spring of 146 BCE, and you're about to spend 17 days methodically erasing one of the ancient world's greatest cities from existence. The sun's beating down on your bronze helmet, 40,000 Roman legionaries are spread across the coastal plain beside you, and the city ahead, with its triple walls rising 70 feet high, has absolutely no idea it's living its final weeks. You probably won't survive the street fighting that's coming, but if you do, you'll go home with enough Carthaginian loot to buy a small farm. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing the global bedtime crew. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your name doesn't matter. You're a legionary in the army of Scipio Aemilianus, and you've been camped outside these walls for 3 years now. 3 years of dust, dysentery, and watching Carthage's defenders mock you from their battlements. Your general, young Scipio, grandson of the Scipio who beat Hannibal, has spent those years building a siege wall around the entire city, cutting off every supply route, every fishing boat, every grain shipment. The Carthaginians built a secret harbour exit and launched surprise naval attacks. Scipio blocked it with a stone barrier. They smuggled food through their triple wall defences. Scipio starved them anyway. The army around you isn't just Romans. You've got Numidian cavalry from North Africa, former Carthaginian allies who switched sides because Rome pays better. There are Spanish slingers whose grandfathers fought for Hannibal, Greek engineers who've studied siege warfare since they were teenagers. Historians still argue whether Scipio had exactly 40,000 men or closer to 50,000. But standing in this camp, surrounded by cooking fires and equipment wagons stretching to the horizon, you're not counting. You just know it's the largest concentration of military force Rome's ever deployed for a single city operation. You enlisted because a debt collector was going to take your family's small holding outside Rome. The army offered pay, grain rations, and a share of whatever plunder the city yielded. Carthage, you were told, was wealthy beyond imagination. Warehouses stuffed with African ivory, Egyptian grain contracts worth fortunes, purple-dyed textiles that sold for more than gold. The cynical veterans in your century told you different. Carthage was a hollowed-out shell, already destroyed by 90 years of losing to Rome, clinging to survival through sheer commercial stubbornness. They were both right. The city ahead of you covers about 10 square miles of the Cape Bon Peninsula, built on hills rising from the Mediterranean. 500,000 people are crammed behind those walls, maybe more, maybe fewer. Census data from civilizations you're about to annihilate tends to be unreliable. What you can see are the defences. 3 concentric walls, the outermost one 13 feet thick with 4-story towers every 200 feet housing catapults, scorpions, and enough stored ammunition to fight for a year. Behind those, the city's 6-story tenement houses climb toward the Bursa Citadel Hill, where the Temple of Eshmun gleams white in the afternoon sun. Your centurion, a scarred veteran named Marcus, who lost 3 fingers in Spain, explains the operational plan around the evening campfire. Rome doesn't just want Carthage defeated. The Senate, led by Cato the Elder's political inheritors, Cato died 3 years before this siege began, but his Carthage must be destroyed speech echoes still. Wants Carthage deleted. Not conquered, not occupied, erased, every building demolished, every stone scattered, the harbour filled with rubble, the ground ritually cursed so nothing can legally be rebuilt here. Why? Asks the teenager next to you, a farm kid from Latium on his first campaign. Marcus spits into the fire. Because 50 years ago, Carthage still had the wealth and trade networks to challenge us. Because Hannibal, nearly conquered Italy 70 years back and Rome never forgets. Because Carthage keeps rebuilding after we beat them, and the Senate's tired of fighting the same enemy every generation. It's darker than that, though nobody says it. This is terror as policy. Rome sending a message to every other Mediterranean power. Defy us repeatedly, and we don't just defeat you, we remove you from history. You've drilled for weeks on urban warfare tactics. The quirkier soldiers have been making bets on how many days the final assault will take. 5? 10? The engineers think 3 weeks minimum, accounting for the building-by-building demolition work. One drunk Iberian auxiliary claims he can clear a 6-story tenement in under an hour. He'll die on day 2, crushed when a rooftop catapult stone brings down an entire stairwell. Tomorrow, the assault begins. Scipio's sappers have finally undermined a section of the outer wall near the harbour. You can see the cracks spreading in the stonework. The Carthaginian defenders know it too. You hear their priests chanting through the night, sacrificing to Baal Hammon and Tanit, their old gods who've protected this city for 7 centuries. Your gear's laid out beside your bedroll. Gladius, scutum shield, chain mail if you're lucky enough to have it, leather canteen, hard biscuit rations, and a length of rope that Marcus says you'll need for climbing through the city's vertical maze. You're sharing a tent with 7 other legionaries. One's writing a letter home he'll never finish. Another's sharpening his sword for the 4th time today. The youngest is crying quietly, trying to hide it. You don't sleep much. None of you do. The wall comes down 3 hours after dawn, and the sound is like the earth splitting open. You're in the second wave, close enough to hear the stonework groan and crack, far enough back that the initial collapse doesn't bury you under 10 tons of Carthaginian masonry. The sappers have done elegant work, undermining the foundation supports and replacing them with timber props soaked in pitch. When they lit the fires at sunrise, you watched smoke pour from the wall's base for 2 hours before the inevitable physics took over. The gaps may be 40 feet wide, not huge, but enough for your sentry to go through 6 men abreast. Except you can't, not yet, because the rubble piles created a steep slope that's still settling, still hot from the timber fires, and the Carthaginians are already up on the intact wall sections, throwing everything they've got at the breach. Javelins, rocks, ceramic pots filled with quicklime that explode on impact and blind anyone caught in the dust cloud. One legionary beside you takes a roof tile to the face, just a clay tile, the kind that covers houses, but hurled from 70 feet up it caves in his helmet and he drops without a sound. Scipio's first wave is already scrambling up the rubble. These are the velites, light infantry with small shields and multiple javelins, trained to move fast and draw fire. They're good at it, maybe too good. You watch them reach the top of the breach and funnel through into the city beyond, and then the screaming starts. Not Roman screaming, Carthaginian. High-pitched, desperate, the sound of civilians who thought they were safe behind triple walls, realizing they're trapped in a kill box with nowhere left to run. Move! Move! Marcus is shoving you forward, and suddenly you're climbing, your hobnailed sandals slipping on loose stone still radiating heat. The air smells like burning wood and something sweeter, sicker, bodies trapped in the initial collapse already cooking in the rubble. You make it through the gap and stumble into Carthage proper, and it's nothing like the clean military camps you're used to. You're in what used to be the harbour district. The wall breach has dumped you into a maze of warehouses, dock buildings, and cramped residential streets that twist toward the water. The famous circular Punic harbour, that engineering marvel that could shelter 220 warships in covered berths, is maybe 300 yards to your left, and between you and it are approximately 500,000 terrified people with no evacuation plan. Carthage never built escape routes. Why would they? For 700 years these walls held. The city's population had swelled during the 3-year siege as rural Carthaginians fled inside for protection. Now, they're all pressed into 10 square miles with a Roman army pouring through an ever-widening breach. The initial evacuation panic is already causing more casualties than your legionaries. You hear buildings collapsing as crowds surge through narrow streets, stampedes crushing people against dead-end walls. Historians still argue whether the civilian population was 500,000 or closer to 200,000, ancient census data being what it is. But standing in this chaos, you're not running a head count. You just know there are too many of them, they're everywhere, and your training's already breaking down because urban warfare is nothing like the open field battles you drilled for. Your sentry's supposed to maintain formation, advance in coordinated ranks, secure intersections methodically. Instead, you're immediately fragmented into squad-sized units chasing through alleys barely wide enough for 2 men abreast. The Carthaginians aren't fighting as organized military units either. Most of their actual army died in earlier battles during this war. What you're facing now is desperate civilian resistance. Old men with farming tools, women dropping paving stones from second-story windows, teenagers with kitchen knives. You corner a Carthaginian dock worker in a fish sauce warehouse. He's maybe 60, holding a boat hook like a spear, backing toward amphorae stacked to the ceiling. You're supposed to offer surrender. Rome's official policy is to accept yielding combatants for the slave markets. They're worth more alive. But this old man lunges at you with surprising speed, and your gladius is in his chest before you consciously decide to strike. He slides off your blade and collapses into a puddle of fermented fish guts, and you're already moving because staying still in this chaos gets you killed. The quirky thing nobody told you about Carthage. The buildings are too tall. Mediterranean cities usually max out at 3, maybe 4 stories. Carthage has 6-story tenement blocks, ancient high-rises built to maximize rents from that packed 500,000 population. They're engineering marvels, with internal wooden frameworks and clever weight distribution that would impress Roman architects if those architects weren't currently planning to demolish everyone. But tactically, they're nightmares. Each building is a vertical fortress with stairwells that become choke points and rooftops that offer perfect positions for dropping heavy objects on your head. A clay amphora crashes down 2 feet in front of you, full of olive oil, which splashes across the cobblestones and makes the next 10 yards treacherous. You slip, catch yourself, look up to see a Carthaginian woman on a 4th-floor balcony already hoisting another jar. Your javelin catches her in the shoulder, not a kill shot, but she drops the amphora and it shatters on her own balcony. Small victories. By midday, your sentries advance maybe 4 blocks from the breach. The Carthaginians have figured out that they can't stop you in the streets, so they're retreating into buildings and forcing you to dig them out floor by floor. It's exhausting, lethal work. Every doorway might have a spear waiting. Every stairwell might collapse under your weight. Some deliberately sabotaged, some just degraded by 3 years of siege neglect. You're taking a water break in what used to be a textile merchant's shop. Bolts of purple-dyed cloth scattered everywhere, trampled and blood-stained, when the building across the street just falls. Not from fire or siege equipment, from overcrowding. Too many refugees packed onto upper floors, and the wooden supports gave out. It pancakes down in a cloud of dust and screaming, and when the air clears, you're staring at maybe 200 people buried in rubble. Some are already dead. Others are calling for help in Punic, a language you don't speak but whose desperation needs no translation. Marcus doesn't let you stop to dig. Keep moving. Engineers will clear it later. Later means never. Later means those voices will go quiet over the next few hours, and tomorrow there'll just be another pile of rubble in a city that's becoming nothing but rubble. The next 6 days blur into a single continuous nightmare of dust, blood, and collapsing architecture. You lose track of time because the sun barely penetrates the smoke hanging over Carthage. Fires burning in 100 places where legionaries have torched buildings to clear defenders from upper floors. Your sentry's been assigned to the harbour district clearance, which sounds strategic and organised, until you realise it means 6 straight days of dragging Carthaginians out of warehouses, customs houses, and those impossibly tall residential blocks. Sleep happens in 2-hour shifts on whatever flat surface you can find. Last night it was the counter of a spice merchant's shop, your head pillowed on a sack of cinnamon from India. The night before, you collapsed in a fountain courtyard while your tent mate stood watch, then swapped positions 2 hours later. You're so tired that you've stopped flinching at the constant background noise. Screaming, buildings groaning, the crash and rumble of Roman siege equipment being repositioned through streets never designed for wheeled traffic. The Carthaginians have adapted their tactics. They've realised they can't beat you in straight combat, so they're not trying. Instead, they're making every single yard cost you blood. They've barricaded major streets with furniture, market stalls, cargo wagons, anything heavy. Behind these impromptu fortifications, they've positioned whatever weapons they have. A few remaining ballistae dragged from the walls, hunting bows, slings, even the occasional harpoon from fishing boats. It's not enough to stop 40,000 legionaries, but it's enough to make you hate every forward step. You're learning Carthaginian architecture the hard way. These buildings are connected by roof terraces, flat tops designed for sleeping outdoors in summer heat. The Carthaginians are using them as highways, running from building to building above street level, dropping down behind your advancing line, attacking your rear units. Your sentry loses. 2 men to this tactic before Marcus figures it out and starts posting sentries specifically to watch roof lines. The quirky architectural detail that becomes tactically relevant. Carthaginian buildings have external staircases, stone steps running up the outside walls to those roof terraces. Great for catching breezes, terrible for defence. You can climb up and flank defenders without entering the building at all. Day 3, you're clearing a warehouse complex near the circular harbour when you discover what Carthage was actually storing. Not just ivory and textiles, though there's plenty of both, but grain. Mountains of Egyptian grain in sealed amphorae, enough to feed the city for another 6 months if the siege had continued. Except it's been sitting here through 3 years of blockade, and about half of it is rotting, and the smell in the enclosed warehouse spaces is enough to make you vomit through your helmet's cheek guards. The Romans don't waste it. Engineers catalogue everything. Rome's already calculating the value of Carthage's liquidation, tallying assets like accountants. The good grain gets shipped to feed Scipio's army. The rotted stuff gets dumped in the streets, where it creates slippery, foul-smelling obstacles that slow everyone down and spread disease through the packed refugee populations hiding in cellars. You're starting to recognize the pattern of resistance. Morning sees the heaviest fighting. Carthaginians who've rested overnight try coordinated pushes to reclaim lost streets. By afternoon, it devolves into scattered skirmishing. Evening brings the really desperate tactics. Suicide attacks by individuals who've lost everything, fighting with the strength of people who know they're dead regardless. One elderly woman charges your squad with nothing but a cooking pot, screaming in Punic. You try to shove her aside with your shield, but she grabs your javelin and pulls herself onto the point, still screaming until she dies. Historians still argue whether the Carthaginian defenders had any central command at this point. You can tell them from ground level, they don't. There's no coordination, no strategic withdrawal to defensible positions, no organised civilian evacuation. It's just chaos. Pockets of resistance holding out in whatever building they happen to occupy, with no communication between groups, no supply lines, no plan beyond survive another hour. Your sentry reaches the famous circular harbour on day 4, and it's heartbreaking in a way you didn't expect. The engineering is magnificent. A perfectly round, artificial harbour, with a central island housing covered ship sheds, each berth designed to hide a warship from aerial observation. The Carthaginians invented the first naval air cover, basically, roofed docks so enemy scouts couldn't count their fleet. Except the fleet's gone, burned 3 years ago in earlier fighting, and the harbour's full of civilian refugees who thought the water offered escape. They were wrong. There's nowhere to swim to. Scipio's siege wall circles the entire peninsula. Some tried anyway. You see bodies floating in the green-brown water, people who drowned trying to swim past Roman patrol boats. Others are trapped on the central island, surrounded by legionaries advancing across the narrow causeway. They surrender in groups of 50, hands raised, children crying. Your unit isn't handling prisoner processing, that's specialised teams, so you just keep pushing inland toward the rising ground where the Bursa citadel waits. The street fighting gets worse as you climb. Carthage's residential districts are denser here, buildings packed tighter together, alleys barely wide enough for one person. Your shield keeps scraping walls on both sides. The Carthaginians have had 6 days to prepare positions on the high ground, and they're using furniture as weapons now. Actual beds and tables being shoved from 4th-floor windows tumbling down to crush legionaries below. A cedar wardrobe nearly gets you. You hear it falling, dives sideways into a doorway, and the thing splinters on the cobblestones where you were standing 1 second earlier. Marcus is keeping a running count of how many buildings your sentry has cleared. 47, he says on day 5, checking his wax tablet. Maybe 200 to go before we reach the Bursa. 200. The farm kid from Latium looks ready to cry. At this rate, we'll be here for months. We'll speed up, Marcus says, though his voice suggests he doesn't believe it. Defenders are running out of ammunition, food, hope. He's right about ammunition. On day 6, the Carthaginians start throwing pottery, just regular household ceramics, plates and cups and decorative bowls, smashing them into shrapnel against Roman shields. It's more annoying than dangerous, but it shows how depleted their actual weapon stockpiles have become. You watch a teenage Carthaginian boy throw an entire set of dishes at your squad, one piece at a time, methodically hurling his family's dinnerware at an army that's about to kill everyone he knows. When he runs out of plates, he throws himself. The real fight starts when you begin climbing. Not climbing walls, climbing buildings, staircase by staircase, floor by floor, through 6-story tenements that have become vertical battlefields. The Bursa citadel sits on a hill maybe 200 feet above the harbour district, and between your current position and that temple-crowned summit are dozens of these ancient high-rises, each one packed with Carthaginians who've retreated upward like water seeking its level. You're on day 7 now, maybe day 8. Honestly, you've lost count. and your sentry has been assigned to clear a row of residential blocks on the slope leading to the Bursa. The buildings here are the nicest you've seen in Carthage. Proper apartment complexes with interior courtyards, painted frescoes on ground floor walls, mosaic tiles that must have cost fortunes. The wealthy merchant class lived here, back when Carthage had a wealthy merchant class. Now they're fighting you with dining furniture and desperate courage. The first stairwell you enter smells like a latrine. 3 years of siege plus 7 days of urban combat means Carthage's sanitation system, normally quite sophisticated with ceramic pipes and drainage channels, has completely collapsed. The residents of this building have been using the stairwell corners as toilets, because venturing outside means Roman javelins. You're climbing through human waste, trying not to slip, breathing through your mouth, and someone on the 3rd floor is throwing roof tiles down the central shaft. Marcus sends the farm kid up first. He's lightest, fastest, least valuable if the ambush goes badly. You hear him reach the 2nd floor landing, hear a brief scuffle, then his voice calling down, "Clear! Your turn." You climb past a dead Carthaginian woman, maybe 40 years old, still clutching a kitchen knife. Didn't even make it to the landing before someone, probably the farm kid, cut her down. 2nd floor, 2 apartments, both empty, residents fled upward. You can see the evacuation in real time. Abandoned meals on tables, children's toys scattered on floors, a loom with half-finished cloth still stretched on the frame. The quirky detail you notice. Carthaginian apartments have built-in bed alcoves with plaster headboards decorated with protective symbols, the Eye of Horus, the Hand of Hamza, Phoenician letters you can't read. All that divine protection, and here you are anyway, boots muddy on their nice floors. 3rd floor is where they make their stand. The stairwell opens into a common hallway serving 4 apartments, and the Carthaginians have barricaded it with everything movable. Beds, chairs, storage chests, even a small altar to tan it. Behind this furniture wall, you can see maybe a dozen people, old men, women, a few teenagers. No children visible, which means they've sent the kids higher or hidden them in the apartments. "Surrender and you'll be sold, not killed," Marcus shouts in broken Punic, one of maybe 20, words he learned during the siege. They respond with a cooking pot full of fish sauce. It explodes against your shield, covering you in fermented anchovy paste, and the smell is somehow worse than the stairwell toilets. You're going to stink for a week. If you live a week. The fight for 3rd floor takes maybe 10 minutes, but feels like hours. Your squad can only come up the stairs 2 abreast, which means the defenders can concentrate force on a narrow front. They've got the high ground, literally standing on furniture, and every advantage except numbers and training. You lose another legionary here. Poor bastard takes a spear through the throat gap in his armor. He stumbles backward, crashes down the stairs taking 2 men with him, and you're climbing over his corpse before he's finished bleeding out. When you finally break the barricade, it's because Marcus brings up a small ram, just a bronze-headed pole carried by 4 men, and splinters the furniture pile into pieces. The Carthaginians retreat into the apartments. You follow them into a family's home. Cooking area with charcoal brazier, sleeping alcove with those protective symbols, a small shrine with offerings. There's a woman protecting 3 children in the corner. The oldest child, a boy maybe 12, tries to stab you with a ceremonial dagger from the shrine. You knock it aside, and your squadmate behind you is already binding their hands with a rope. Prisoners, slaves. You try not to think about the boy's expression, that particular blend of terror and hatred that you'll see in your dreams for years. 4th floor, similar fight, similar outcome. 5th floor, they're running out of makeshift weapons, throwing pottery and wooden utensils. 6th floor, the roof level, is where you find what's left of this building's population. Maybe 50 people crammed onto the roof terrace, nowhere left to retreat, surrounded by legionaries climbing up from multiple staircases. They don't surrender, they don't fight, they jump. Not all of them. Historians still argue whether these rooftop mass suicides were common or rare in Carthage's final days, but enough that you stop counting after the first dozen. Bodies hitting the street below with sounds you'll never forget. One woman holds her infant while she steps off the edge, and you want to look away but you can't. You're frozen watching people choose death over Roman captivity, and maybe they're right to choose it. The ones who don't jump, you bind and send down to the street-level holding areas. You've cleared one building. The next one rises 60 feet away, connected by a narrow rooftop bridge. Just wooden planks laid across the gap. probably for residents to visit neighbours. The Carthaginians have pulled up half the planks, but there's enough left to cross if you're quick and lucky. Marcus goes first, the farm kid goes second, you're third, and you're halfway across when someone in the target building shoots an arrow that splinters the plank under your front foot. You lunge forward, catch the far edge with your fingers, and haul yourself up while the remaining planks fall into the alley below. Building 2 is worse than building 1. Building 3 is worse than building 2. You're developing a technique now: ram the barricades, drive defenders upward, clear each floor methodically, secure prisoners, move to the roof, cross to the next building. It's factory work violence, repetitive and efficient and soul-destroying. By evening, you think it's evening, the smoke makes it hard to tell, you've cleared 7 buildings and you're standing on a rooftop maybe halfway to the Bursa. You can see the temple clearly now, white marble gleaming above the carnage, and between you and it are at least 20 more buildings just like the ones you've been climbing through all day. Your sentry's down to 40 men from the original 80. Not all killed, some wounded and sent to field hospitals, some simply lost in the maze of buildings and fighting with other units now. Marcus is bleeding from a scalp wound that's soaked his helmet padding. The farm kid has stopped talking entirely, just follows orders with dead eyes. You sit on the roof edge, legs dangling over a 60-foot drop, and eat hard biscuit rations while watching the city burn below. By day 10, or maybe it's day 11, time's gone strange in this ash-choked nightmare. You finally reach the base of the Bursa Hill. The last 200 yards have taken 3 days because every building, every alley, every courtyard has been contested by Carthaginians who know this is their final ground. But now you're standing in what used to be the Agora, Carthage's main marketplace, and ahead of you rises the citadel complex with the Temple of Eshmun at its crown. And there are people everywhere, not fighting, not fleeing, just there. 50,000 survivors, maybe more, maybe less, ancient crowd estimates being what they are, packed into the temple precinct and the open plaza surrounding it. They've abandoned the rest of the city, retreated to this one defensible hill, and now they're trapped between your army below and the temple behind them. You can see children, elderly, wounded, priests in ceremonial robes, soldiers who've thrown down their weapons. The smell of unwashed humanity is overwhelming even from 100 yards away. Scipio's positioned his forces in a complete encirclement. Your sentry holds the eastern approach. Other units ring the remaining perimeter. Nobody's attacking yet. You're just waiting, watching. The Romans have learned that starving out concentrations like this is easier than storming them, even when the people being starved are already half dead from 10 days of urban warfare. The Temple of Eshmun itself is magnificent. White marble construction, probably 150 feet long, with columns carved to represent palm trees, a Phoenician architectural quirk that would look lovely in peacetime but seems obscene, now covered in soot and surrounded by corpses. The temple's dedicated to Eshmun, the Carthaginian healing god, which is grimly ironic given that nobody here is getting healed. Scholars still argue whether Eshmun was equivalent to the Greek Asclepius, or had separate origins in Phoenician Tyre, but you're pretty sure the god's not listening either way. Hasdrubal is somewhere in that crowd. The Carthaginian commander, the man who's led the city's defense for 3 years, who swore to fight to the last. Your officers have been passing around descriptions: tall, ceremonial armor, distinctive purple cloak. The rumor running through your sentry is that he's already negotiating surrender terms with Scipio, personally, privately, saving his own skin while 50,000 people depend on him. The quirky historical detail nobody mentioned during training: Carthaginian generals traditionally wore special cloaks dyed with Tyrian purple. The legendary mollusk-based dye, so expensive it cost more than gold by weight, takes about 12,000 murex snails to make 1 gram of dye. Hasdrubal's probably wearing a fortune on his back while his people starve behind him. Rome will definitely confiscate that cloak, sell the purple to some senator's wife for her party dress. You're sitting on a fallen column, probably toppled during the initial assault days ago, sharing water with the farm kid when the shouting starts. Not from the Carthaginian crowd, from your own lines. Officers running, pointing toward the temple entrance. Someone important's coming out. It's Hasdrubal. You recognize him by the purple cloak, by the way Roman officers are suddenly standing straighter, by the absolute silence falling over your exhausted sentry as they watch Carthage's supreme commander walk down the temple steps with his hands raised in surrender. He's not alone. There are maybe a dozen other high-ranking Carthaginians with him, all the political and military leadership that's left. They're abandoning 50,000 people to approach Scipio's command position under a white flag that looks like it was torn from somebody's tunic about 5 minutes ago. The crowd behind them erupts, not in anger at first, in confusion. You can hear the question spreading through those packed masses even in Punic. What's he doing? Why is he leaving? Is he negotiating for us? The confusion curdles into understanding, and understanding into rage, and suddenly 50,000 voices are screaming at their commander's back as he walks toward the Roman lines. Coward. Traitor. Those words are universal, apparently. They sound similar in every language. Marcus nudges you. Watch the temple. A woman's appeared at the top of the steps. Even from this distance, you can see she's dressed formally. Expensive robes, jewellery that catches the light. She's holding something. No, someone. Multiple small someones. Children. That's Hasdrubal's wife, whispers a Greek auxiliary who speaks better Punic than the rest of you. She's saying, gods, she's cursing him, calling him a coward who sold his people for Roman mercy. Hasdrubal doesn't turn around. He keeps walking towards Scipio's position, keeps his eyes forward, keeps moving away from the woman screaming his name from the temple steps. She's lighting something. Torches. The temple's already been set on fire. You can see smoke starting to pour from the windows, flames licking up the palm tree columns. The Carthaginians inside chose burning over surrender. Maybe 900 people, refugees who'd taken sanctuary in their holier space, and they've turned it into a funeral pyre. Hasdrubal's wife is still holding the children. 2 of them, both young, maybe 6 and 8 years old. Your entire century has gone silent now, watching, knowing what's about to happen and unable to look away. She addresses the crowd. The Greek auxiliary is translating in a whisper. She says Hasdrubal has chosen Roman slavery over Carthaginian death. She says her children will never bow to Rome. She says the gods will remember. The woman throws the first child into the flames. Someone in your century vomits. You hear it splash on the cobblestones behind you, hear the man gasping and retching, but you can't look away from the temple steps where Hasdrubal's wife is holding the second child, is raising him high so everyone, Roman and Carthaginian, can see what she's doing. The second child goes into the fire, and then she follows them. The roar from the Carthaginian crowd is inhuman, grief and fury and something beyond language. Hasdrubal's still walking towards Scipio, his back to the burning temple, to his wife's suicide, to his children's murder. You wonder if he's crying. You wonder if he feels anything at all. History will remember him as the coward who surrendered Carthage. His wife doesn't even get a name in most Roman accounts. She's just Hasdrubal's wife. Her final act defining her completely. The temple's fully engulfed now. The 900 refugees inside are burning alive, and you can hear them. Historians will debate for centuries whether they chose collective suicide or were simply trapped when the flames started. But from where you're sitting, it doesn't matter. They're dying either way. Your orders are to maintain position, prevent escape, wait for the fire to burn out. So you sit and watch, and try not to think about how many children were in that temple. Marcus offers you his wineskin. You drink without tasting it. The temple burns through the night, and by dawn you're receiving new orders. Not attack orders, demolition orders. Scipio's message comes down through the chain of command in simple Latin. Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed, not occupied, not repurposed. Destroyed. Every building, every wall, every stone scattered until future archaeologists will struggle to find where the city even stood. You thought the fighting was over. You were wrong. The fighting's over, but the work is just beginning. Your century's been reassigned from combat operations to demolition crews. It's a strange transition. One day you're climbing through buildings killing people. The next day you're climbing through buildings killing architecture. Marcus distributes new equipment. Iron pry bars, sledgehammers, coils of rope, wooden wedges. The gladius stays on your hip, but now your primary weapon is a tool designed for tearing down what humans built up. Scipio's established a systematic grid. The city's been divided into sectors, each sector assigned to specific units, each unit responsible for complete demolition within their zone. Your century gets a wealthy residential district near the Bursa, those nice apartment buildings with the protective symbols and mosaic floors. Buildings you fought through last week. Now you're going to erase them. The engineers brief you on technique. Roman demolition isn't random destruction. It's methodical deconstruction designed to ensure nothing can be salvaged or rebuilt. First, you strip anything valuable: bronze fittings, cedar beams, marble decorations, even ceramic roof tiles if they're intact. These get catalogued and shipped to Rome or sold to offset campaign costs. Then you attack the structure itself: pry bars in wall joints, sledgehammers on support columns, ropes to pull down anything still standing. The goal isn't just to knock buildings down, it's to break them so thoroughly that the rubble can't be reused. Think of it like this, the engineering officer explains. We're not just defeating Carthage, we're removing the option for anyone to ever rebuild Carthage. Future generations shouldn't even know where the streets were. It's vandalism as foreign policy. You're essentially being ordered to commit architectural genocide, and the weirdest part is how everyone treats it as routine labour. The same soldiers who fought desperately to take these buildings now approach their destruction with the bored efficiency of construction workers on a public works project. Day 1 of demolition. You're back in that 6-story tenement where you watched people jump from the roof. It's empty now. Survivors were processed days ago, marched to holding pens for the slave markets, children separated from parents, families torn apart to maximize resale value. You're standing in the apartment where you found that woman protecting 3 kids, remember? The shrine's still there. Offerings to gods who didn't save anyone. You start with the shrine. Bronze oil lamps get tossed into the salvage pile. The small statue of Tanit, maybe 6 inches tall, painted limestone, gets your sledgehammer. It shatters satisfyingly and you feel nothing. Should you feel something? Probably, but you've gone numb somewhere between day 7 and day 11, and now you're just following orders. The quirky architectural detail that makes demolition harder than expected. These Carthaginian buildings are too well built. The engineers are actually annoyed. Roman construction typically uses mortar that's easier to separate. You can pry stones apart with patience. Carthaginian builders used a superior mortar recipe involving volcanic ash from Sicily that's essentially early concrete. Historians still argue whether Phoenician or Roman concrete technology was more advanced. But from your perspective, swinging a sledgehammer at walls that refuse to crack, the Carthaginians definitely won this round. This stuff's tougher than anything in Rome, Marcus mutters, attacking a support column that's absorbing impacts without meaningful damage. 300 years from now, there'll still be Carthaginian foundations under whatever gets built here. He's right, by the way. 21st century archaeologists will find Punic-era construction under Roman ruins, under medieval ruins, under modern Tunis. But right now, in 146 BCE, your job is to destroy it anyway. The process is exhausting. Combat has adrenaline, fear, the sharp focus of survival. Demolition is just endless, repetitive, physically brutal labour. Swing the hammer, pry the stone, pull the rope, swing the hammer. Your hands blister, then the blisters pop and bleed, then they callus over. Your back screams from hours hunched over pry bars. The farm kid throws up from heat exhaustion on day 3 of demolition work and gets whipped for it by an officer who thinks he's malingering. Fire teams work alongside demolition crews. Anything wooden gets burned. Roof beams, floor joists, door frames, furniture that wasn't valuable enough to loot. The smoke over Carthage shifts from black, buildings burning with people inside, to grey, buildings burning as demolition accelerant. The whole city smells like a forge, like the end of the world. You discover that wealthy Carthaginians had hypocauste heating systems, underfloor furnaces that circulated warm air through ceramic pipes. Roman technology, actually, probably copied during the decades of cultural exchange before this final war. Breaking these is satisfying in a way you can't quite articulate. You're destroying heating systems that kept children warm, that represented someone's engineering pride, that proved Carthaginian civilization was sophisticated and advanced, and absolutely doomed. By day 4 of demolition, your sector's landscape has changed completely. Buildings that took decades to construct are now rubble piles. Streets are buried under broken stone. The residential district you're demolishing housed maybe 10,000 people last month. Now it's an archaeological site for a civilization that won't exist tomorrow. Scipio tours the sectors daily, inspecting demolition progress, demanding thoroughness. He walks through what used to be Carthage's merchant quarter and orders crews to break the rubble smaller. I want to see broken stone, not broken buildings, he tells your unit. I want future travellers to look at this ground and not be able to imagine what stood here. You're witnessing the systematic erasure of a culture, and you're being paid extra for it. By day 14, you've been rotated to a specialized demolition unit. Not everyone has the stomach for this work. Some legionaries keep seeing the families they killed when they're tearing down the homes those families lived in. You're apparently numb enough or broken enough or practical enough that you can swing a sledgehammer through someone's bedroom wall without hesitating. So now you're on temple duty. The temples are priority targets. Scipio wants Carthage's religious infrastructure destroyed first, most thoroughly, because temples are where cultural memory lives. Every Phoenician colony from here to Gibraltar has heard of the Temple of Eshmun, which burned with 900 people inside, remember, the Temple of Tanit, the Temple of Baal Hammon. When these are gone, when there's no physical space for Carthaginian religious practice, the culture itself starts to die, even before the last survivors are sold into slavery. Your team's assigned to the Temple of Tanit, the goddess of fertility and the moon. It's smaller than Eshmun's temple was, maybe 90 feet long, but the architecture's breathtaking, if you had any capacity left for beauty appreciation. Columns carved to resemble papyrus bundles, painted in blues and golds that have faded from 3 years of siege weather, but still catch the light. The interior sanctuary has cedar panels from Lebanon, each one carved with protective symbols. The altar's a single piece of Egyptian granite, probably weighing 3 tons. "Start with the roof," orders the engineering officer, a Greek named Philippos who treats demolition like an exact science. Strip the bronze fittings, salvage the cedar beams, then pull down the columns from top to bottom. I want this reduced to foundation level by tomorrow sunset. You climb onto the temple roof with the farm kid and a Numidian auxiliary who's been surprisingly good with ropes. The roof tiles are ceramic, decorated with protective glyphs. The hand of Hamza, the eye of Horus, Phoenician letters spelling prayers to Tanit. Each tile probably had a blessing ceremony when it was installed. Now you're prying them loose and tossing them to the ground, where they shatter into pieces too small to curse anyone. The quirky detail about Carthaginian temples: they have roof access chambers built into the upper structure, small rooms where priests stored ceremonial items and probably conducted private rituals away from public view. You find one while stripping the roof beams. Inside, bronze incense burners, valuable goes to the salvage pile, scrolls written in Punic script, you can't read them so they go to the fire pile, and a small statue of Tanit herself, maybe 2 feet tall, carved from ivory with lapis lazuli inlays for eyes. You should catalogue it. Send it to Rome for some general's trophy room. Instead, you pocket it. Nobody sees. It's small enough to fit in your pack, and you tell yourself you're saving one piece of Carthage from complete oblivion. Really, you just want something beautiful from this nightmare. Something that isn't broken yet. The cedar beams take 4 men to carry down. Lebanese cedar, straight-grained and fragrant even after centuries. These will be shipped to Rome and incorporated into some senator's villa. At least the wood survives, even if displaced and repurposed. The Carthaginian trees that these beams came from were probably cut 300 years ago, when Carthage was being founded. Now they're spoils of war. Fire teams move in once the roof's stripped. They're specialists, mostly Greek and Sicilian auxiliaries who've done this kind of work before, burning out fortified positions during earlier campaigns. They stack kindling around the wooden doors, the cedar wall panels, anything combustible that hasn't been deemed valuable enough to salvage. The lead fire team specialist is explaining accelerants to anyone who'll listen. Mix pitch with sulfur, and you get flames that stick to stone. Burns hot enough to crack marble. He's right. You watch them paint this mixture onto the temple's interior columns, then light it. The flames are unnaturally bright, almost white-hot, and within an hour the marble columns are developing stress fractures. The heat causes differential expansion in the stone. The surface heats faster than the interior, and the marble literally tears itself apart. It's geology as violence. Historians still argue whether Roman fire teams used early forms of Greek fire, the legendary incendiary weapon that supposedly burned on water. But you can tell them definitively. What you're watching is just good old-fashioned pitch and sulfur. Nothing magical. Just applied chemistry turning stone into rubble. By evening, the temple interior's fully involved. Flames are shooting through the roof gaps you created, smoke pouring into the Carthage skyline. You're demolishing the market district simultaneously. A sprawling complex of covered stalls, merchant offices and warehouse spaces where Carthaginians traded everything from Spanish tin to African elephants. Was. traded, past tense. The markets are easier than temples, mostly wooden construction with some stone foundations. Your crew just sets fires and lets physics handle the rest. But there's something particularly depressing about destroying commercial spaces. These stalls represented people's livelihoods, families that had run businesses for generations. You find a spice merchant's inventory still chalked on a wall: cinnamon, pepper, frankincense, myrrh. Exotic goods from India and Arabia, sold by someone whose name you'll never know to customers who are all dead or enslaved. Marcus has been keeping count. We've demolished 47 temples, 122 commercial buildings, maybe 600 residential structures. Scipio wants the harbour filled by day 17. Filled? With what? With everything. The rubble from the buildings goes into the harbours, both the commercial harbour and the circular military harbour. We're going to bury Carthage's naval infrastructure under its own ruins. It's vindictive beyond military necessity. Carthage's fleet was already destroyed. The harbour facilities were already captured, but Scipio wants them gone, wants to ensure that even if someone tried to rebuild here in 100 years, they couldn't use Carthage's famous harbours. Can't have a naval power without harbours, and you can't dig out harbours when they're filled with 50 feet of compacted rubble. You're part of the crew that demolishes what used to be luxury mansions overlooking the harbour. These aren't 6-story tenements. They're sprawling single-family estates with private courtyards, gardens, long dead from siege water restrictions, and architectural features that would make Roman architects jealous. Mosaic floors depicting Mediterranean trade routes, with tiny tesserae pieces showing ships and ports and exotic animals. You're supposed to salvage the mosaics, chip them out piece by piece for shipping to Rome. Instead, you just sledgehammer them. It's faster. And at this point, speed matters more than preservation. Scipio wants Carthage erased, not catalogued. The most depressing demolition is the libraries. Carthage had 3 major libraries, collections of scrolls and codices accumulated over 700 years of Phoenician literacy. Scientific treatises, agricultural manuals, poetry, history, philosophy. The kind of intellectual heritage that defines a civilization. Most of it's already been looted by Roman officers looking for famous Greek texts. What remains is Punic language material that Romans can't read, and therefore don't value. It burns beautifully. Day 15, and you're standing in what used to be Carthage's main forum with a crowd of legionaries watching Scipio Aemilianus perform a religious ceremony that will confuse historians for the next 2,000 years, specifically the salt myth. You know the story because everyone knows the story. Rome ploughed Carthage with salt, poisoning the earth so nothing could ever grow here again, a final act of absolute spite. Except, that's not what's happening. There's no salt. 0. Not 1 grain. The whole salt-sowing legend is complete fiction that won't even be invented until the 19th century, when some European historian misreads a text about a different Roman ritual and the myth spreads like wildfire because it sounds appropriately dramatic. But you're here, actually participating in Carthage's final destruction, and you can report definitively, nobody's spreading salt on anything. What Scipio is doing is far stranger and more Roman. He's performing a devotio, a ritual curse ceremony that will legally and religiously consecrate this ground to the infernal gods, not metaphorically, not symbolically. In Roman religious law, you can dedicate territory to the gods of the underworld in a binding ceremony that makes the land itself cursed, uninhabitable, forbidden for human use. It's the same ritual Romans use when they want to permanently abandon one of their own cities after a catastrophic defeat. Now they're using it on Carthage. The ceremony requires specific officials, augurs to read the omens, priests to speak the formulaic curses, and a senior magistrate, that's Scipio, to make the dedication legally binding. You're here as a witness, which in Roman law means your presence makes the curse enforceable. There are maybe 500 legionaries arranged in formation around the forum's perimeter, all of us serving as collective witnesses to what amounts to Carthage's religious execution. The augurs have been examining bird flight since dawn. Apparently the gods need to approve of this curse before it takes effect, and divine approval comes through ornithological observation. One augur announces that he's seen 6 eagles flying left to right, which is favourable. Another counters that he observed vultures circling clockwise, which might be problematic. They argue about bird semiotics for 20 minutes while you stand at attention in the sun, sweating in your armour, wondering if the gods really care about vulture rotation patterns. The head priest, a Roman official who travelled with the army specifically for ceremonies like this, begins the formal curse. It's in archaic Latin that you barely understand, full of antiquated verb forms and religious terminology. But the Greek auxiliary next to you whispers a rough translation. He's dedicating this ground to Disparta and Proserpina, the gods of the underworld. He's saying that anyone who builds here, anyone who plants here, anyone who tries to inhabit this space will be violating divine law and bringing down the wrath of the infernal powers. The quirky legal detail: once this ceremony is complete, Carthage becomes what Romans call locus sacra, sacred ground, but sacred in the terrifying sense. Not sacred like a temple where you worship, sacred like a plague pit that the gods have claimed for themselves. Building on cursed ground doesn't just violate human law, it offends the divine order and brings supernatural consequences. Scipio himself speaks the final binding oath. He's stripped off his military decorations for this, wearing a simple white toga like a civilian magistrate rather than a general. His voice carries across the ruined forum. By my authority as consul of Rome, by the power granted to me by senate and people, I declare this ground accursed. Let no plough turn this earth. Let no foundation be laid upon this stone. Let no Roman— he pauses for emphasis. Let no human dwell within these boundaries. This land belongs to the gods below. It's theatre. Obviously it's theatre, but it's legally binding theatre that will have real consequences. Any Roman who tries to resettle Carthage after this ceremony will be prosecuted for religious crimes. Any Roman magistrate who authorizes reconstruction will be violating sacred law. Scipio's not just destroying Carthage physically, he's putting a legal fence around the rubble that says off-limits forever. Historians still argue whether the curse was meant to be permanent or just a temporary prohibition until passions cooled. You can tell them from personal observation. Scipio means it permanently. He's 38 years old, at the height of his career, and he's staking his reputation on making sure Carthage never threatens Rome again. The curse is his insurance policy. After the formal dedication, they plough the forum, not with salt, with an actual bronze plough pulled by a white ox, which is apparently ritually significant. The plough traces the boundary of what's now cursed territory, creating a legal perimeter. The furrows may be 3 inches deep, purely symbolic, but in Roman legal thinking that furrow now marks the edge of the underworld's domain. You're ordered to participate in the symbolic ploughing, not actually pulling the plough, that's for ceremonial specialists, but walking the perimeter behind the plough, creating the witness chain. 500 legionaries following a furrow around 10 square miles of destroyed city, testifying that yes, we saw this ground dedicated to Disparta. Yes, we heard the curse pronounced. Yes, this ceremony was performed according to proper ritual. It takes hours. Your feet hurt. The symbolic significance is lost on you somewhere around mile 3. But you keep walking, because orders, and because refusing to participate in a religious ceremony is a floggable offence. The walk gives you time to look at what you've destroyed. 15 days ago, this was a functioning city. Markets, temples, homes, harbours, 500,000 people living their lives, probably not that different from Romans, working, eating, loving, raising children, worrying about money. Now it's rubble. Systematic, thorough, carefully catalogued rubble, but rubble nonetheless. Carthage's famous libraries, burned. The scroll collections that preserve Phoenician knowledge going back to the city's founding in 814 BCE, ash. The agricultural treatises that Carthage's colonies across the Mediterranean depended on, gone. Rome kept maybe 28 books, the ones about farming that a senator thought might be useful. Everything else, poetry, philosophy, history, science written in Punic that Romans couldn't be bothered to translate, destroyed. You're walking through the largest act of cultural erasure in ancient history, and it's just Tuesday. Marcus is walking behind you in the witness chain. He leans forward and mutters, "Think anyone will remember this city in 1,000 years?" You look at the rubble, at the cursed furrow you're following, at the smoke still rising from demolition fires. Maybe in stories, probably wrong stories, he laughs quietly. Yeah, they'll probably say we sowed it with salt or something dramatic like that. You both laugh, because the truth is somehow both more mundane and more terrible than any dramatic myth. No salt, just systematic demolition, religious curses, and the erasure of 700 years of Phoenician civilization. because Rome decided there wasn't room in the Mediterranean for two great powers. The ceremony concludes at sunset. Scipio pronounces the curse complete. Carthage is now legally dead, not just defeated, not just destroyed, but religiously prohibited from resurrection. Tomorrow, you'll continue filling in the harbours. Day 16, and your unit's been reassigned from demolition to slave processing, which sounds cleaner than it is. Processing means herding approximately 50,000 Carthaginian survivors, everyone who didn't die in the street fighting, didn't burn in the temple, didn't jump from rooftops, into temporary holding pens while Roman contractors catalogue them for the auction blocks. The holding pens are set up on the beach south of the destroyed harbour. It's the flattest available space that can accommodate this many people, and the sea prevents escapes in one direction. Your sentry's job is perimeter security. Stand there with your gladius and make sure nobody runs. Simple. Except, it's not simple at all, because you're watching the final liquidation of an entire civilization's population, and they know it, and you know it, and everyone's pretending this is just routine administrative work. The survivors look worse than you expected. These aren't the defenders you fought in the streets. Most of them died or were processed earlier. These are the people who hid in cellars, crawled out after the fighting stopped, survived on whatever they could find. You see a woman who's probably your mother's age, her expensive robes torn and filthy, holding a child who can't be more than 4. You see an old man with a scholar's ink-stained fingers, standing alone, staring at nothing. You see teenagers, families, individuals, all pressed together in the holding pen like livestock, which, legally speaking, is exactly what they are now. Under Roman law, captured enemy populations belong to the state, specifically to the general who conquered them. Scipio has the legal right to sell every single survivor and pocket the proceeds, though custom dictates he'll split the profits with his army. That's how conquering armies get paid. Your share of 50,000 slaves sold at market rates? Enough to buy that farm you enlisted for. The contractors arrive by mid-morning. These are professional slave dealers from across the Mediterranean, Romans, Greeks, Phoenicians from other cities, who have no qualms about selling their ethnic cousins if the price is right. They walk through the holding pens like you'd inspect horses at a market, checking teeth, feeling muscle tone, asking questions through interpreters about skills and education. That one, the one with the Greek-style clothing, a contractor's pointing at a middle-aged Carthaginian man who looks like he was probably a teacher or scribe. Educated slaves sell for premium prices. They can keep accounts, tutor children, manage estates. The contractor's assistant writes something on a wax tablet. The Carthaginian man doesn't react. He just stands there, understanding that his value is being assessed, that his education makes him more expensive chattel. The quirky economic detail about ancient slave pricing, it's shockingly standardized. An unskilled adult male laborer sells for about 500 denarii, roughly 2 years' salary for a legionary like you. A skilled craftsman brings 2,000 denarii. An educated Greek or Carthaginian who can read, write, and do mathematics? Up to 10,000 denarii, sometimes more. Children under 10 are cheaper, maybe 200 denarii, because they require years of feeding before they're productive. But teenage girls bring premium prices for reasons nobody states openly, but everyone understands. You're watching wealth being created, not metaphorically, literally. 50,000 people at an average price of maybe 1,000 denarii each equals 50 million denarii flowing into Roman hands. That's enough money to fund entire provinces, build aqueducts, finance new military campaigns. Carthage isn't just being destroyed, it's being converted into liquid capital that will finance Rome's expansion for the next generation. Your cut, as a common legionary, will be maybe 50 denarii, enough for that small farm, enough to retire from military service and never swing a gladius again. The farm kid next to you is calculating his share out loud. 50 denarii, I can buy my family's land back from the creditors, buy seed grain, maybe a plough ox. Marcus overhears him. You're assuming honest accounting, generals always skim. You'll get 30 denarii if you're lucky. He's right. Historians still argue about the exact distribution of Carthage's liquidation proceeds, but corruption in military accounting is universal and timeless. Scipio will claim legitimate expenses, paying engineers, feeding the army, compensating allied auxiliaries, and somehow those expenses will eat up most of the profit before it reaches common soldiers. Still, 30 denarii is 30 denarii, more wealth than you've ever held at once. The separations are the worst part. Families are deliberately broken up to prevent resistance and escape attempts. The woman with the 4-year-old, mother and child are assigned to different lots. The child goes to a dealer who specializes in household servants, young enough to be trained, old enough to follow orders. The mother goes to agricultural labor lots. She's screaming in Punic, reaching for the child, and you're supposed to prevent her from disrupting the processing line. You do your job. You push her back into position with your shield, keep her moving toward the agricultural labor section. Try not to hear the child crying for his mother. This is what victory looks like. This is what destroying a rival civilization means when you reduce it to accounting entries. The educated Carthaginians fetch the best prices. There's a whole section of the holding pen for scribes, teachers, doctors, engineers, anyone with marketable knowledge. A Greek contractor is negotiating for a Carthaginian physician, some doctor who apparently trained in Alexandria and knows advanced surgical techniques. They settle on 15,000 denarii. The doctor doesn't speak, doesn't resist. He just walks to the designated area for high-value purchases, his face completely blank. Think he'll run? The farm kid asks. Where to? Marcus responds. Carthage is rubble. His family's probably in those pens. Running gets you crucified, and compliance gets you a chance to survive in some Roman household. He's smart enough to do the math. By evening, the contractors have completed initial assessments. Tomorrow they'll start the actual auctions, public sales where bidders compete for specific lots. But the bulk sales have already been negotiated. Entire families sold together at discount rates to plantation owners who need agricultural labour. Groups of young men sold to mine operators who work slaves to death in Spanish silver mines within 5 years. The pretty teenage girls sold to dealers who don't specify what kind of work their purchases will be doing. You're rotating off perimeter duty when you see something that makes you stop. An elderly Carthaginian woman, has to be 70, maybe older, standing alone in a corner of the holding pen. She's too old for heavy labour, too old to be worth much at auction. Probably she'll be purchased cheap by someone who needs household help and doesn't mind that she'll die soon. She's singing, quietly in Punic, some melody you don't recognise. It might be a hymn to Tanit, it might be a lullaby, it might be something older than Carthage itself, passed down through Phoenician generations going back to Tyre and Sidon in the distant east. Nobody stops her. The contractors ignore her. She's not valuable enough to warrant attention. Your fellow guards don't care. She's not causing problems. She just stands there singing while Rome processes the remnants of her civilization into inventory. You walk away. Tomorrow you'll be back on demolition duty, filling the harbours with rubble, ensuring that even if someone freed every enslaved Carthaginian tomorrow, they'd have no city to return to. The complete package: enslave the people, destroy the place, curse the ground they lived on. Marcus finds you later, distributing the preliminary payment, 10 denarii as an advance on your final share. You hold the coins in your hand, Roman denarii stamped with the Senate's mark, bought with Carthaginian lives. Enough for wine tonight, Marcus says. Tomorrow we finish the harbours. You pocket the coins and try not to think about whose sale paid for them. Day 17. The final day. You're standing knee-deep in Mediterranean seawater, part of a 1,000-man chain passing rubble baskets from the demolished city into Carthage's famous circular harbour. The engineering marvel that once sheltered 220 warships is being systematically filled with the broken stones of the civilization that built it. Each basket holds maybe 40 pounds of rubble, shattered marble from temples, broken ceramic from tenements, crushed limestone from defensive walls. You pass it to the legionary beside you, he passes it to the next man, and eventually it gets dumped into the harbour's deepest sections. Scipio's engineers have calculated that filling both harbours, the circular military harbour and the rectangular commercial harbour, will require approximately 200,000 cubic yards of rubble. That's every destroyed building in Carthage, methodically relocated from the city grid into the harbour basins. It's not enough to just dump it randomly. The fill has to be compacted, layered, tamped down to prevent future excavation. You're not just filling a harbour, you're creating a geological layer that will confuse archaeologists 2,000 years from now. The work is brutal. You've been passing baskets for 6 hours straight, and your shoulders are screaming. The man in front of you collapsed an hour ago from heat exhaustion, and was dragged to the beach and replaced with a fresh legionary. The chain can't stop. Stopping means the entire operation loses rhythm, and Scipio's determined to complete this operation today. 17 days to destroy Carthage. Not 16, not 18, 17. Because that's the number that will sound impressive in Senate reports. Behind you, the last demolition crews are bringing down Carthage's outer walls. Those triple walls that seemed invincible 17 days ago are being systematically dismantled stone by stone. The outer wall's 13 feet thick. Every stone has to be pried loose, loaded onto carts, hauled to the harbour. The towers that once housed catapults and scorpions are being pulled down with ropes and wedges. Nothing can remain that might give future defenders any advantage. You can see smoke still rising from the Byrsa Hill, where clean-up crews are burning the last remnants of Carthage's administrative district. The forum where Scipio performed his curse ceremony 3 days ago is now just flat ground marked by that shallow ritual furrow. The Temple of Tanit that took you a full day to demolish is now a foundation scar. The residential districts where you spent 6 days in vertical urban warfare are indistinguishable rubble fields. Marcus is further down the chain, passing baskets with the mechanical efficiency of someone who's completely disconnected from the meaning of what he's doing. The farm kid's not in the chain, he's on cart duty, hauling rubble from demolition sites to the harbour. You haven't seen him smile since day 9, since he watched a Carthaginian mother separated from her child. He does his job, he follows orders, his eyes are dead. By mid-afternoon, the engineers declare the circular harbour sufficiently filled. You're reassigned to the commercial harbour, which is larger, rectangular, harder to fill evenly. The process continues. Pass the basket, receive the next basket, pass it forward, repeat. Your mind goes blank somewhere around basket number 300. This is meditation through exhaustion. This is how you process being part of the largest act of urban destruction in ancient history. You reduce it to repetitive physical labour until you can't think anymore. The sun's setting when Scipio tours the harbours one final time. He walks along what used to be the harbour edge, now just a line where water meets compacted rubble. He's checking depth, ensuring the fill is adequate, making sure nothing can be salvaged or repurposed. An aide reports statistics. Both harbours filled to an average depth of 43 feet, estimated 175,000 cubic yards of material. Compaction testing shows adequate stability. Scipio nods. Good. Mark the perimeter. I want boundary stones placed every 100 feet declaring this ground cursed and prohibiting reconstruction. And that's it. 17 days of systematic destruction, concluded with an engineering report. You're dismissed at sunset. No ceremony, no speeches, just orders to return to camp, clean your equipment, prepare for the march back to Rome. Your century gathers on the beach south of the filled harbours, looking back at what used to be Carthage. It's hard to believe a city stood here. The skyline's gone. No 6-story tenements, no temple columns, no defensive towers, just rubble fields and smoke. We did it, the farm kid says quietly. We actually did it. Did what? Marcus asks. Killed a city, erased it, like it never existed. Marcus spits into the sand. Rome will remember. They'll tell stories about this for centuries. How Scipio Aemilianus destroyed Carthage so thoroughly that future generations will argue about where it even stood. You want to feel proud. You want to feel like you participated in something glorious, some great Roman achievement. Instead, you feel empty, hollow. You've spent 17 days killing people, destroying buildings, processing survivors into slavery, filling harbours with rubble. You've been paid 30 denarii for it. Your share arrived this afternoon in a leather purse that feels heavier than it should. Was this glory? Or was this just a template? A blueprint for how Rome deals with rivals who resist too long, who fight too hard, who make the mistake of challenging Roman supremacy. You've participated in comprehensive urban destruction, systematic cultural erasure, and the complete liquidation of a civilian population. Historians will argue for 2 millennia about whether this was necessary, justified, or just naked imperialism dressed up in security concerns. Standing here in the ashes, watching smoke rise from the civilization you helped destroy, you don't have answers. You just have 30 denarii, memories that will never fade, and the knowledge that Rome won't stop here. This is the model now. This is how empires respond to perceived threats. Somewhere in the rubble, that ivory statue of Tanit sits in your pack, one small piece of beauty you saved from total destruction. It doesn't make you a hero. It makes you a grave robber. But at least something survived. One goddess 2 feet tall with lapis lazuli eyes, pulled from the flames of her own temple by a soldier who couldn't save anything else. Tomorrow you march for Rome. Tonight you sit on the beach, watching the last. Smoke rise from Carthage's ruins, trying to process what you've witnessed and wondering if anyone will believe you when you describe what destroying a civilization actually looks like. The waves are gentle tonight, lapping at the beach where you sit with your sentry, and the Mediterranean stretches endlessly before you in the gathering darkness. The smoke has finally begun to clear, drifting eastward on evening breezes, carrying away the last remnants of fires that burned for 17 days straight. Your muscles ache with that deep, settled exhaustion that comes after impossible work is finally complete, and around you, other legionaries are falling silent one by one, finding their own peace with what you've all done here. In the morning, you'll break camp and begin the long march back to Rome, back to that small farm you've earned with Carthaginian blood and stone, back to a life that will seem impossibly quiet after these 17 days. The 30 denarii in your purse will buy seed grain and a plough ox, will turn you from soldier into farmer, will let you live out your years without swinging another gladius or climbing another blood-soaked stairwell. And maybe, in time, the memories will fade. The screaming, the burning, the children separated from mothers, the old woman singing in a language that's already dying. Maybe you'll convince yourself it was necessary, that Rome's security demanded this totality, that great civilizations sometimes require terrible choices. But tonight, you simply rest, feeling the cool sand beneath you and hearing the eternal rhythm of waves against the shore, waves that were here before Carthage was founded 700 years ago, waves that will remain long after even Rome itself has crumbled into memory. The stars are emerging overhead, the same stars that Phoenician sailors used to navigate from Tyre to these African shores, founding cities and colonies that spread their culture across the known world. Those stars witnessed Carthage's birth, and now they witness its erasure, indifferent and eternal, reminding you that empires rise and empires fall, but the Mediterranean keeps its own counsel. Close your eyes now. Let the sound of the water soothe you. Let 17 days of destruction finally settle into the past where they belong. Tomorrow brings new journeys, but tonight offers only this: rest, silence, and the gentle certainty that even the hardest things eventually end.